After spending 7 years building his dream home, the priest received one letter that erased it all, before he slept there even once. Welcome to Hotspot True Life Stories, where we learn life through the mirror of real sacrifice, real pain, and real faith. If stories that shake your heart and teach you something matter to you, don't just watch, subscribe, share, and speak in the comments. Because this isn't just a story, this is life, lived. She watches him standing in the center of the empty room, and she knows, before he even opens the envelope, that something is about to break. Father Matthew holds the letter in both hands. The paper is official, church district seal, his name typed across the front in letters that don't care how long he's been here or what he's given. Outside, the village is still celebrating. Music drifts through the windows he installed himself. Laughter from people who saved for weeks to buy meat for tonight's feast. Children running circles around the building he spent 7 years constructing, brick by brick, with money no one knew he had. The parsonage smells like fresh paint and new wood, the floors are smooth, the roof doesn't leak. There's running water now, clean and constant, electric lights in every room. A kitchen big enough to cook meals for visiting clergy, for community gatherings, for the kind of future he imagined but never said aloud. He worked construction jobs on his rest days. Tutored teenagers in mathematics and English for folded bills pressed into his palm. Sold his father's watch, his bicycle, a leather-bound Bible his grandmother gave him at ordination. Every coin went into this building, every bruise and blister and sleepless night went into these walls. The villagers thought the diocese was funding it. They didn't ask questions when he said resources were being allocated. They didn't know he was the resource. That he'd been eating 1 meal a day for 3 years. That his cassock had holes in the lining. That he slept on a cot in the old parsonage even after the ceiling started shedding plaster, because every dollar saved was another bag of cement, another sheet of metal roofing, another week closer to finished. He opens the envelope. The letter is short, 2 paragraphs, professional, polite. Effective immediately. Transfer approved. New assignment, St. Catherine's Parish, distant diocese. Departure, within 48 hours. No explanation, no thank you for your service, no acknowledgement that he just handed them a building worth more than they'd spent on this village in a decade. Father Matthew folds the letter, once, twice. His hands are steady, but she notices the way he closes his eyes for 5 seconds longer than a blink. Outside, someone calls his name, Father. Come eat. The food is getting cold. He doesn't answer. There's a specific kind of silence that follows years of sacrifice. It's not bitter, it's not even sad, it's just vast. Like standing in a room you built with your own hands and realizing you were never building it for yourself. He thinks about the 7 years, the Sunday masses where 15 people showed up and 10 of them were children, the weddings he performed for couples who paid him in vegetables. The funerals where he dug graves himself because the village couldn't afford laborers. The nights he sat with dying elders who had no family left, holding their hands until the breathing stopped. Nobody outside this village knows his name. He's never been promoted, never been invited to speak at conferences or regional gatherings, never had his photograph in a diocesan newsletter. He was sent here because no one else would come, because this parish was a career dead end, a place where priests were forgotten. And he stayed. Not because he was holy, not because he was a saint, but because leaving felt like betrayal, and he'd spent his whole life trying not to be the kind of man who abandons people when things are hard. The celebration outside grows louder, someone starts singing, voices join in, off-key and joyful. Father Matthew walks to the window. He can see them gathered in the courtyard, families who brought dishes wrapped in cloth, teenagers setting up speakers, elders sitting on benches he built last year. Mrs. Okoro is crying. Mr. Adeyemi is showing his grandson the walls, explaining how father worked every evening after prayers, how he mixed cement with his own hands. They think this is a beginning. He knows it's an ending. There's a specific way people look at you when they realize you're not going to fight for yourself, not because you're weak, but because fighting would require you to believe you deserve something, and maybe you stopped believing that a long time ago. Father Matthew folds the letter one more time and places it on the windowsill. He'll pack tonight, one small bag. He came with almost nothing, he'll leave the same way. Tomorrow, before the village wakes, he'll be gone. Because if he says goodbye, they'll ask him to stay. And if they ask him to stay, he'll have to explain why he can't. And if he explains why he can't, they'll see the truth, that the church doesn't protect the ones who give everything, it protects the system. And sometimes, protecting the system means removing the people who remind everyone what sacrifice actually costs. Outside, a child shouts, "Father Matthew built us a miracle." He closes his eyes. When pride grows louder than truth, silence becomes dangerous. But sometimes silence is the only dignity left. They said real stories don't matter anymore, that faith is outdated, that sacrifice is foolish. If you believe truth still has a voice, if you believe some things are worth more than recognition, subscribe to Hotspot True Life Stories. Let's continue. She remembers the day he arrived, 7 years ago, because everyone else remembers it too, not because he was impressive, but because he wasn't. Father Matthew stepped off the bus with one suitcase and a canvas bag slung over his shoulder, no car, no driver, no assistant carrying his belongings, just a man in his early 30s with dust on his shoes and a letter from the diocese folded in his pocket. The village wasn't expecting much. They'd had 4 priests in 6 years. Each one stayed less time than the last. The first one complained about the heat. The second one said the parish was beneath his qualifications. The third one left after 2 months without telling anyone, just disappeared one Sunday morning and never came back. The fourth one filed a formal request for reassignment after seeing the parsonage, a building so deteriorated that rain came through the roof during Mass, and termites had eaten half the support beams. When Father Matthew saw it, he didn't say anything. He just set his suitcase down in the driest corner and asked where he could find a broom. Mrs. Okoro, who ran the parish council, watched him sweep dust and dead insects from the floors for 2 hours. She kept waiting for him to stop. To say this was unacceptable. To demand better accommodations. He didn't. That night, he slept on a cot he borrowed from the church storage room, no mattress, no pillow, just a thin blanket and the sound of the roof creaking in the wind. The village gave him 3 weeks, maybe a month if he was stubborn. He stayed 7 years. In the beginning, people didn't know what to make of him. He wasn't charismatic. He didn't preach sermons that made you weep or shout. He wasn't the kind of priest who performed miracles or spoke in tongues or drew crowds from neighboring towns. He was just present. When Mr. Adeyemi's shop burned down, Father Matthew showed up the next morning with work gloves and helped clear the rubble. When the school roof started leaking, he spent 3 weekends patching it with tar and salvaged metal sheets. When Mrs. Chukwu's husband died and she couldn't afford the funeral, Father Matthew paid for it, quietly, without announcement, and then helped her apply for a widow's pension she didn't know existed. People started noticing small things. He never ate before making sure the poorest families had been fed. He walked everywhere, even in the rain, because he said the church van should be saved for emergencies. He learned everyone's name within the first month, not just the adults, but the children, the elderly, even the ones who didn't come to Mass. And he never, ever asked for anything. The diocese sent a monthly stipend. Modest, but enough to live on if you were careful. Father Matthew used half of it for the church and gave the rest away. When people asked how he survived, he said, "God provides." What he didn't say, he was tutoring teenagers in the evenings, teaching English and math for whatever families could pay. Sometimes it was money. Sometimes it was food. Sometimes just a thank you. What he didn't say, he was working construction on his rest days, laying bricks for a contractor 2 towns over who paid cash and didn't ask questions. What he didn't say, he sold his watch 6 months after arriving. Then his bicycle. Then a leather Bible his grandmother had given him at ordination, the one with his name embossed in gold on the cover. The parsonage kept deteriorating. Cracks spread through the walls. The foundation started sinking on one side. During the rainy season, water pooled in the main room, and Father Matthew had to move his cot 3 times to find a dry spot. Mrs. Okoro finally said something. "Father, you can't keep living like this. The building isn't safe." He smiled. It's held this long. It's going to collapse. Then I'll sleep outside. She stared at him. Why won't you ask the diocese for help? He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, because if I ask for help, they'll send an inspector. And if they send an inspector, they'll see how bad things are. And if they see how bad things are, they'll close the parish. And if they close the parish, where will you go? Mrs. Okoro didn't have an answer. That was the year Father Matthew made his decision. Not dramatically. Not with announcements or fundraising campaigns. Just a quiet choice, made alone in a room that smelled like mold and rain. He would build a new parsonage himself. Not with church funds. Not with donations that would burden families already struggling. Not with favors that would create debt. With his own hands, his own money, his own time. People thought he was crazy. Mr. Adeyemi told him it would take decades. Mrs. Chukwu said he'd kill himself trying. Father Matthew just smiled and said, then I'll die building something that lasts. He started small, clearing the land behind the church, sketching plans on notebook paper, calculating costs down to the last nail. Every week, he worked, before dawn prayers, after evening Massachusetts. On rest days when other clergy visited family or took vacations. The villagers watched the foundation go in. Then the walls, slow, painstaking. One brick at a time. They didn't know he was skipping meals. They didn't know his hands bled. They didn't know he'd sold everything he owned except his cassock and a single pair of shoes. They just knew that somehow, against all logic, the building was rising. And Father Matthew never complained, never asked for help, never explained where the money came from. Because you know how people start acting different when money enters the room. Questions turn into expectations. Gratitude turns into entitlement. And he couldn't risk that. Couldn't risk the building becoming about anything other than what it was supposed to be, a place for the next priest. And the one after that. And the one after that. A house that would stand long after he was gone. She knows the exact moment the village stopped seeing him as temporary. It was the day they realized the building wasn't a dream anymore, it was becoming real. Year 3, the foundation is complete. The walls are waist high. Father Matthew works every evening after prayers, mixing cement in a borrowed wheelbarrow, laying bricks in straight lines that somehow never need adjustment. His hands are calloused now, permanently stained with dust that doesn't wash off. Nobody asks where the money comes from. Not directly. But they watch. Mrs. Okoro notices he's thinner, his cassock hangs looser. When she brings him food after Mass, he thanks her, wraps it carefully, and she sees him later giving it to the Nwosu family. 6 children, 1 income, never enough. Mr. Adeyemi sees him at the construction site 2 towns over, carrying bags of cement in the heat, working alongside day laborers who don't know he's a priest. When their eyes meet, Father Matthew just nods. Mr. Adeyemi nods back. Neither of them speaks about it. The teenagers he tutors start paying attention in a new way. Before, he was just the priest who helped with homework. Now, they see him arrive at their homes with dust in his hair, exhaustion in his eyes, but he still sits down and explains algebra with the same patience he had when he was rested. One evening, a boy named Chidi asks him, "Father, why are you doing this?" Father Matthew looks up from the math problem they're working on. Doing what? Building, working like this, you don't have to. Father Matthew is quiet for a moment. Then he says, when I was your age, my father built our house. Every evening after his job, he'd come home and work until dark. Took him 4 years. I asked him once why he didn't just hire someone, save time. You know what he said? Chidi shakes his head. He said, when you build something with your own hands, you put your life into it. And when you're gone, people will know you were here. Not because of what you said, but because of what you left behind. Chidi thinks about this. Is that why you're building the parsonage? So people remember you? Father Matthew smiles. No. I'm building it so the next priest has a home. So the one after him has a home. So 50 years from now, when I'm dead and forgotten, there's still a place for someone to serve God in this village. But you'll never live in it. That's not the point. Chitty doesn't understand, not yet. But he will, years later, when he's older and realizes that the most important things people do are often the things they never benefit from. Year 4, the walls are shoulder high now. The village starts contributing in small ways, not money, because they don't have it, but time. Mr. Adeyemi shows up one Saturday with his sons and helps carry materials. Mrs. Chukwu organizes the women to cook meals for anyone working on the site. Children fetch water, clean tools, sing songs while the adults work. Father Matthew tries to tell them they don't have to, that this is his responsibility. Mrs. Okoro cuts him off. Father, you've been carrying us for 4 years. Let us carry you for one day. He doesn't argue after that. But he still won't take money. When people try to donate, he redirects them. Give it to the school, give it to the widows. Give it to the families who need it. But Father, the building will get finished. It always does. And somehow, it does, slowly, painfully. With every spare coin he earns from tutoring, from construction work, from selling things nobody knows he owned. Year 5. He sells his father's watch, the one given to him at ordination, inscribed on the back, to Matthew, who will serve faithfully. It's worth more than 6 months of his stipend. He takes it to a jeweler 3 towns away, where nobody knows him, and walks out with cash folded in his pocket and a hollow feeling in his chest. He doesn't tell anyone. There's no one to tell. That night, he sits alone in the old parsonage, the one that's barely standing, the one he'll leave the moment the new building is ready, and he thinks about his father. Dead now, 10 years, buried in a village Father Matthew hasn't visited since his assignment here. He wonders if his father would be proud. Or disappointed. Or if it even matters. You know how people start acting different when they realize someone's sacrificing more than they should. Some people are inspired. Others are uncomfortable. Because sacrifice is a mirror, it shows you what you're not willing to give, and most people don't like looking at that reflection. Year 6. The roof goes on. Proper metal sheets, not the rusted scraps that cover the old parsonage. The windows are installed, real glass, not plastic sheeting. The doors are solid wood, with locks that actually work. The building looks like something that belongs in a city, not a forgotten village where roads wash out every rainy season and the nearest hospital is 2 hours away. People start taking photographs. Showing them to relatives in other towns. Talking about Father Matthew like he's done something impossible. He hasn't. He's just done what needed to be done, the way it needed to be done, for as long as it needed to take. But try explaining that to people who've spent their lives watching others give up. Year 7. The interior work begins. Plastering walls. Installing electrical wiring. Painting. Every detail planned, every corner finished properly. Father Matthew works alone most evenings now. Not because people stopped helping, but because he needs the silence, needs the repetition, needs to remember why he started this. Not for recognition, not for comfort, not even for himself. For the idea that something could be built right. That someone could serve faithfully without expecting return. That a forgotten village could have something beautiful, even if the world never noticed. The day the building is finished, he stands in the center of the main room and looks around. Clean walls, smooth floors, lights that work, a kitchen with running water. Bedrooms for visiting clergy, space for meetings, for community gatherings, for the kind of future he'll never see. His hands are shaking. Not from pride, not from relief. From the sudden, overwhelming knowledge that he's done. And now there's nothing left to build, nothing left to prove, just the quiet terror of wondering what comes next. He doesn't know yet that the answer is already on its way, sealed in an envelope being delivered by a courier who doesn't care about 7 years of sacrifice. He just knows he's tired. And the building is beautiful. And that will have to be enough. She watches him smile through the speeches, and she knows, he's already somewhere else. The courtyard is fuller than it's been in years. Families who moved away have come back for today. Children are dressed in their best clothes, tables are covered with dishes people spent their last money preparing, jollof rice, fried plantains, grilled chicken that cost more than most of these families spend in a week. Someone hung streamers between the trees. Someone else brought a portable speaker that crackles when the volume gets too high. There are balloons. Hand-painted signs that read, "God bless Father Matthew and thank you for our home." Mrs. Okoro stands at the front, giving a speech. Her voice breaks twice. She talks about the 7 years. About how the parish was dying when he arrived, about how he stayed when everyone else left. About how he built them a miracle with his own hands. Father Matthew sits in a plastic chair, hands folded in his lap, nodding at the right moments. His cassock is clean today, someone washed and pressed it for him without asking. His face is calm, grateful, and present. But his eyes keep drifting to the side, to the corner of the courtyard where he saw the courier arrive an hour ago. Where the man in the motorcycle helmet handed him an envelope and asked him to sign for it. Where he signed, thanked the man, and slipped the envelope into his pocket without opening it. He knows what it is. Official church seal. His name typed across the front. You don't serve 7 years in a forgotten parish without learning to recognize the shape of bad news. Mr. Adeyemi speaks next. He talks about how Father Matthew helped rebuild his shop after the fire. How he never asked for repayment, how he showed up every morning for 2 weeks with work gloves and a smile, never mentioning that he'd paid for half the materials himself. The crowd claps. Someone shouts, "Amen." Father Matthew's hands are shaking. He presses them together harder. Mrs. Chukwu stands. She's crying before she even starts talking. She tells the story of her husband's funeral, how she had nothing, how Father Matthew appeared with everything needed and never said a word about it. How he sat with her for 3 nights while she grieved, not preaching, not offering platitudes, just sitting in the silence with her until the silence felt less heavy. More applause. More amens. Father Matthew can feel the envelope in his pocket. The weight of it. The finality. A group of teenagers performs a song they wrote for him. Off-key and earnest. The lyrics are about faithfulness, about building, about how God sends people to places where they're needed most. Chidi sings the loudest, his voice cracking on the high notes. Father Matthew smiles. It's real, it hurts. Then the children come forward with drawings. Pictures of him working on the building. Pictures of the parsonage with the sun shining over it. Pictures of him standing with his arms spread wide, like he's holding the whole village. One little girl, maybe 6 years old, hands him a drawing and whispers, "You're my hero." Father Matthew takes it with both hands. Studies it carefully. Thanks her in a voice that's steady but quiet. The little girl runs back to her mother, beaming. Father Matthew folds the drawing once, carefully, and puts it in his pocket. Next to the envelope. The celebration continues. Food is served. People eat standing up because there aren't enough chairs. Conversations overlap. Laughter rises and falls, someone starts dancing, others join in. Father Matthew stands at the edge of it all, plate in hand, watching. Mrs. Okoro approaches him. "Father, you're not eating." "I am," he says, gesturing to the plate. She studies him. "Are you all right?" "Yes." Just, taking it all in. She doesn't believe him. He can see it in her eyes. But she doesn't push, just squeezes his arm and says, "We're grateful, Father. More than we can say." He nods. "I know." She walks away, and he's alone again in the middle of the crowd. You know how sometimes you can be surrounded by people who love you and still feel completely isolated. Not because they don't care. But because there's a distance between what they see and what you know. They see a celebration, you see an ending. And you can't tell them, because telling them would ruin this moment for them, and they've had so few moments worth celebrating. Father Matthew watches Mr. Adeyemi show his grandson the building, pointing at different sections, explaining how Father built each one. The grandson looks up at the parsonage with wide eyes, like it's a cathedral. He watches Mrs. Chukwu laughing with other women, her face lighter than he's seen it in years. He watches Chitty and his friends taking photos in front of the building, posing like they're part of something important. And he thinks, this is why. Not for recognition, not for comfort, not even for the satisfaction of completion. For this, for them, for the brief, fragile moments when people who've been forgotten remember what hope feels like. The sun starts to set. The sky turns orange, then pink, then purple. The celebration doesn't slow down. Someone lights a bonfire. The music gets louder. Father Matthew slips away. Not dramatically, just a quiet exit while everyone's distracted. He walks into the new parsonage. The building he's never slept in, never will. The rooms are empty. Clean. Waiting. He stands in the center of the main room, where he stood this morning, where he'll stand one more time before he leaves. He takes the envelope from his pocket. Opens it. Reads it twice. Transfer approved, effective immediately. New assignment, St. Catherine's Parish. Departure, within 48 hours. No explanation, no acknowledgement, no choice. He folds the letter. Puts it back in his pocket. Outside, someone calls his name. Father. Come back. We need you for the group photo. He closes his eyes, takes a breath, opens them. Then he walks back out into the celebration, smiling like his heart isn't breaking, like he isn't about to disappear from their lives without explanation, like this isn't the last time he'll see most of these faces. Because that's what you do when you love people. You protect them from truths that would hurt them. You carry the weight alone, you let them have their joy, even when yours is ending. The group photo happens. Everyone crowds together. Children in front. Adults behind. Father Matthew in the center, surrounded by people who think they'll see him tomorrow. The camera flashes. He'll be gone before sunrise. She watches the sun rise over the empty parsonage, and she knows, by now, they've found the note. Father Matthew left at 4 a.m, no goodbye mass, no final blessing. Just a canvas bag over his shoulder, the same one he arrived with 7 years ago, and footsteps that didn't make a sound. He walked to the main road in darkness and caught the first bus heading north, paid cash, didn't look back. On the altar, he left a handwritten note. Thank you for 7 years of faith, I have been reassigned to St. Catherine's Parish. Please welcome the new priest with the same grace you showed me. The building is yours, use it well. God bless you all. Father Matthew. That's it, no explanation, no phone number, no forwarding address. Mrs. Okoro found the note at 6 a.m. when she came to prepare for Sunday Massachusetts. She read it 3 times. Then she walked to the new parsonage and found it empty, bed made, floors swept. Nothing personal left behind. Like he was never there. By 7, the whole village knew. By 8, people were gathered in the courtyard, confused, angry, heartbroken. Why would he leave without saying goodbye? Did we do something wrong? How could the diocese transfer him now? After everything? Nobody had answers. Mr. Adeyemi called the diocesan office. Got transferred 4 times. Finally reached someone who confirmed the transfer but refused to explain it. Personnel decisions are confidential. The new priest will arrive within the week. He hung up, furious. 7 years. He gives 7 years, and they move him like he's nothing? Mrs. Chukwu was crying. He didn't even let us thank him properly. The teenagers stood in a group, silent. Chitty held the drawing the little girl had given Father Matthew, the one that was supposed to be in his pocket. He'd found it on the altar, carefully placed beside the note. Father Matthew had left it behind, on purpose, because he knew if he kept it, he wouldn't be able to leave. The new priest arrived 5 days later, Father Benedict. Younger, well-dressed, he drove a car, new, clean, with air conditioning. He walked into the parsonage with 2 suitcases and a laptop bag, looked around at the clean walls and proper floors, and said, "This is nice, much better than my last assignment." The village received him politely, coolly. They came to Mass, they shook his hand. They didn't mention Father Matthew unless asked. Father Benedict didn't ask. He settled in quickly, hung curtains, bought furniture, installed a television. Started talking about modernizing the parish, better music, updated schedules, a social media presence. People nodded, smiled, said nothing. 3 weeks passed. Then a man appeared at Sunday Mass, well-dressed, official-looking. He sat in the back and watched, didn't take communion, didn't introduce himself. After Mass, he approached Mrs. Okoro. "I'm Inspector Okonkwo, Diocesan Financial Oversight. I need to see the parish records, all of them going back 7 years." Mrs. Okoro's heart sank. "Is something wrong?" "That's what I'm here to determine." She brought him the record books. Father Matthew had kept them meticulously, every donation, every expense, every transaction documented in his careful handwriting. Inspector Okonkwo spent 3 hours going through them. Then he asked for the diocesan allocation records, the monthly funds sent from the central office for parish operations. Mrs. Okoro brought those too. The inspector compared them. Line by line. Month by month. Then he looked up. "Where's Father Matthew?" "He was transferred. A month ago." "Do you know why?" "No. We were never told." Inspector Okonkwo was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "The records show significant discrepancies. Money allocated for parish operations that was never used for parish operations." Mrs. Okoro felt cold. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Father Matthew redirected funds, consistently, for years." The room went silent. "He stole from the church?" Mr. Adeyemi's voice was tight. "No." The inspector shook his head. "He gave it away. Look, here, funds allocated for priest housing and stipend. He took almost nothing, redirected it to widow assistance, school repairs, medical emergencies. Here, funds for church maintenance, he used half and gave the rest to families in crisis. Every month, for 7 years." Mrs. Okoro stared at the records. "But, the parsonage, how did he build it if he was giving everything away?" Inspector Okonkwo flipped through more pages. "There's no record of diocesan funds being used for the new building. Not 1 naira. Which means he built it himself," Mr. Adeyemi finished quietly. "With his own money." The inspector nodded. "And according to these records, he also refused salary increases 3 times, declined housing allowances, and turned down every offer of additional support." He paused. "But there's something else." He pulled out a separate file. 6 months ago, Father Matthew filed a report, quietly, about irregularities in regional fund distribution, money meant for rural parishes being diverted, inflated expense reports from wealthier churches. He documented everything. Mrs. Okoro's breath caught. He reported corruption. He reported fraud. High-level fraud. And when you report that kind of thing? The inspector looked at them steadily. The institution has to protect you, even if it means removing you from visibility. The room was silent. "You're saying the transfer wasn't punishment," Mrs. Chukwu said slowly. "It was protection." Inspector Okonkwo closed the files. "I'm saying Father Matthew made powerful people very uncomfortable. And the safest thing to do was move him somewhere remote. Somewhere far from anyone who might retaliate." Mr. Adeyemi sat down heavily. "So he sacrificed everything, his comfort, his savings, his future, and then he sacrificed his home here to expose corruption?" "I can't speak to his motivations. I can only tell you what the records show." Mrs. Okoro looked at the parsonage through the window. The building Father Matthew would never live in. The building he'd bled for. "Does he know we know?" she asked quietly. "I doubt it. He probably thinks you believe he just abandoned you." The weight of that sat in the room like a stone. You know how sometimes the people who love you most are the ones who disappear without explanation. Not because they don't care, but because explaining would put you in danger, or burden you with knowledge you can't carry, or force you to choose between them and your own safety, so they leave. They let you be angry, they let you feel abandoned, because it's easier for you to hate them than to know the truth. Father Matthew knew, before he left, he knew they'd be hurt, confused, maybe even bitter. But he also knew that if he stayed and fought, the consequences wouldn't fall on him alone, they'd fall on the parish. On the people he'd spent 7 years protecting. So he left quietly, let them think what they needed to think, carried the weight alone. The way he always had. She watches them standing at the entrance of a church smaller and poorer than the one they left behind, and she knows, this is the moment everything comes full circle. 3 years have passed. Mrs. Okoro, Mr. Adeyemi, Mrs. Chukwu, and Chidi, now almost 20, traveled for 2 days to get here. Buses, then a hired car, then the last 5 kilometers on foot because the roads don't reach this far. The parish is in a region so remote it doesn't appear on most maps. No electricity grid. No running water. The church is made of mud bricks and corrugated metal. The parsonage, if you can call it that, is a single room attached to the back, with gaps in the walls wide enough to see through. They asked at the diocesan office, called in favors. Tracked transfer records. Someone finally told them where Father Matthew had been sent after St. Catherine's. Then where he'd gone after that, then where he'd requested to go after that. Always poorer, always more remote, always moving toward the places no one else wanted. They find him in the church, kneeling in front of the altar, alone. It's mid-morning. The light comes through cracks in the roof, making patterns on the dirt floor. Mrs. Okoro stops at the entrance. Her hand goes to her mouth. He's thinner, his hair is graying at the temples. His cassock is patched in 3 places. But his posture is the same, straight, focused, present. Chidi is the first to speak. Father Matthew? Father Matthew turns. For a moment, he doesn't recognize them. Then his eyes widen. He stands quickly. Mrs. Okoro? Mr. Adeyemi? What are you, how did you? Mrs. Okoro walks forward, and before she can stop herself, she's crying. We've been looking for you, 4 months. Father Matthew looks at each of them, confused, concerned. Is something wrong? Is someone hurt? No, Mr. Adeyemi says quietly. We needed to find you. Father Matthew gestures to the wooden benches. Please. Sit. I'll bring water. We didn't come for water, Mrs. Chukwu interrupts gently. We came because we needed to say something. Father Matthew sits slowly. They sit across from him. The silence stretches for a moment. Then Mrs. Okoro speaks. We know why you left. Father Matthew's face doesn't change. I was transferred. It's normal. We know about the report, Mr. Adeyemi says. About the corruption you exposed. About the funds you redirected to families instead of keeping for yourself. About why they moved you. Father Matthew is very still. Inspector Okonkwo came, Mrs. Chukwu adds. Showed us the records. Explained everything. Chidi leans forward. You let us think you abandoned us, you let us be angry, you left without saying goodbye because you thought it would protect us. Father Matthew looks down at his hands. The calluses are still there. Deeper now, he's been building again, they can see another structure rising behind the church, half finished. It wasn't about protection, he says quietly. It was about, if I'd stayed, if I'd fought the transfer, there would have been questions, investigations, the parish would have been scrutinized. Funding could have been cut. I couldn't risk that. So you sacrificed yourself, Mrs. Okoro says. Again. Father Matthew shakes his head. I didn't sacrifice anything. I just went where I was needed. You built us a home with your own hands, Mr. Adeyemi's voice breaks. You gave us 7 years. You exposed corruption that could have ended your career. And then you disappeared without letting us thank you. There was nothing to thank me for. Father. Chitty's voice is firm. Stop. Please. Just stop pretending it didn't cost you everything. Father Matthew looks at him. At this boy who's now a young man. Who used to struggle with algebra and now teaches it to younger children in the village. It didn't cost me everything, Father Matthew says softly. It gave me everything, purpose, community. The chance to build something that mattered. But you never got to live in it, Mrs. Chukwu whispers. Father Matthew smiles, it's gentle, real. I did live in it. Every day I worked on it, every brick I laid, that was living in it. The building was never for me, it was for the idea that something could be built right. That people could be served faithfully, that a forgotten place could have something beautiful. He looks at each of them. You're using the building, aren't you? The parsonage? Mrs. Okoro nods. Father Benedict lives there. But we also use it for community meetings. For school programs. For feeding programs. Exactly like you planned. Then I lived in it, Father Matthew says simply. Every time you gather there, every time it serves its purpose, that's me living in it. They sit in the silence of that truth. You know how sometimes the most profound things are said in the simplest words. No grand speeches. No dramatic declarations. Just quiet truth, spoken by someone who's lived it so deeply they don't need to perform it. Mr. Adeyemi looks around the small church, at the dirt floors. The patched walls, the half-finished building outside. Father, you're doing it again. Aren't you? Father Matthew follows his gaze. The school needs classrooms, the children are studying outside, when it rains, they can't learn. And you're building it yourself. Someone has to. You're going to kill yourself doing this. Father Matthew laughs, actually laughs. It's the first time any of them have heard it in years, maybe. But what a way to go. Mrs. Okoro reaches into her bag, pulls out an envelope. The parish took up a collection, for you, it's not much, but... Father Matthew raises his hand, I can't accept that. Father. Use it for the school, for the families, for whatever you need. Please. She looks at him, this man who's incapable of keeping anything for himself. Who's built his entire life around the principle that everything given is everything gained. She puts the envelope away. Then we'll donate it in your name, for the school here. Father Matthew smiles. Thank you. They stay for 2 hours, share a simple meal, bread and fruit, water from a well. Tell him about the village, about how the parsonage stands strong, about how people still talk about him, about how his example changed them in ways they're still discovering. When it's time to leave, Mrs. Okoro hugs him. Tightly, come visit us. Please, even just once. Father Matthew hugs her back, maybe. Someday. They both know he won't, not because he doesn't want to, but because there's always another place that needs him more. At the entrance, Chitty turns back. Father? That thing you said, about your father, about building something with your own hands so people know you were here? Father Matthew nods. You were wrong. Father Matthew tilts his head, curious. People don't remember you because of what you left behind, Chitty says. They remember you because of what you taught them about what it means to give, really give, without keeping score, without expecting return. Father Matthew's eyes glisten, he doesn't speak, just nods. They leave as the sun is setting, walk the 5 kilometers back to where the car waits. Nobody talks, there's nothing left to say. Except this. Some people build houses, Father Matthew built lives, and the difference is that houses stand in one place, but lives carry forward. Into other villages, other choices, other moments when someone has to decide between comfort and sacrifice, between recognition and service, between building for themselves and building for something larger. Years from now, when people tell the story of the priest who built a parsonage he never slept in, they'll miss the point entirely. The point was never the building. It was the decision, made every single day for 7 years, to be the kind of person who builds anyway, who gives anyway, who stays anyway. Not because anyone's watching, not because anyone will remember, but because a house is easy to build. Sacrifice is where God truly lives. This is the story of a man who understood something most of us forget. Legacy isn't built in the moments people applaud, it's built in the silence. In the early mornings and late nights when no one's watching, in the choices to give when keeping would be easier, in the buildings we construct knowing we'll never live in them, for the people who come after us, for the quiet belief that faithfulness doesn't require witness. Father Matthew didn't build a parsonage, he built a testament to what it means to serve without counting the cost. And perhaps the real miracle isn't that he sacrificed everything, it's that he never once called it sacrifice. He called it duty, he called it purpose, he called it love. We live in a world that measures worth by what we keep. Father Matthew showed us it's measured by what we give away. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of someone in your own life who gave quietly, who sacrificed without announcement, who built something they never benefited from, honor them. Share this story. Leave a comment about the person who taught you what real sacrifice looks like. Subscribe to Hotspot True Life Stories, because these are the narratives that need to be told, the ones that cost something. The ones that change us. Like and subscribe, not for the algorithm, but because true stories like this deserve to be remembered.